everyone, Becca here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sewing up the track set from Lowland Kids and I am going to be only sewing up the top today. I do have another video covering the bottoms, but I decided to just split them up so that it is easier. So if you're looking for the bottoms, I will link that in the description down below. Now for this pattern, they do have it binding down the shoulders and the sleeves. And I'm actually going to be doing a little bit of a different method than what is in the instructions. I find it to be much simpler and cleaner. So if binding scares you, this is a great tutorial on another way to add that stripe without really changing much about the pattern. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I just wanted to show you the pattern pieces that you're going to have. So for this one, pretty standard for the most part of a sweatshirt. So you'll have your front and back piece, you will have your waistband piece, two cuffs, a neckband, and then where it's different is the sleeves. So you're actually going to have 4 sleeve pieces that are basically 2 sleeves cut in half. So you can see here these pieces line up, make a whole sleeve, but they're cut in half. So you should have 2 sets of opposites, which means when you fold them in half with right sides together, they are the same. So you don't want 4 of all the same pieces. And you can see here when you lay them like this, they don't match up, which is what you want. And then you also have 2 binding pieces for the sleeves. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to take 2 of our sleeves, make sure that there are opposite pieces, and our front, it doesn't matter, I guess this is my back. You can start on your front or your back, it doesn't matter. And what you're going to do is the top part of your sleeve is your shoulder. So you're going to line the upper part of your arm side of your sleeve up with your shoulder point here and pin that on. And then you're just going to pin that on all the way around the arm side to the armpit. Pin that on, and then you'll do the same thing with this piece, right sides together. I don't know if I said that. Again, start up with your upper shoulder, and you'll just pin that on all the way around. And then you're also going to do that with your back piece here. You'll take, or I guess your front, sorry, I keep messing this up, your front piece, and you will just take your other set of sleeves, again, right sides together, start at your shoulder seam, go put that on, match it all the way up, ease it into your armpit, pin those on, and then you're going to just sew up all 4 of those arm sides. Once you have those sewn on, you can see here, this is what it looks like just after you've sewn with the right sides together, and then you open it up, and it is going to look like this, and they'll both look relatively the same. Now what we're going to do, we are going to just use our back piece for this part, and as I mentioned, for the binding on the sleeves and the shoulders, I am doing a different method. If you watched my tutorial for the pants, this is the same method I did on the binding on the side of the pants. But I just find this is a little bit easier, a little bit cleaner, and gives basically the same results. Alright, so what we're going to do, we're just going to work one side at a time of our back sleeve. And we are going to take our binding piece here and fold it in half with wrong sides together, matching up this long side. What I like to do is just match these up here and start at my neckline and pin that on, matching up all 3 raw edges, and then coming down to this end and folding it, and then matching it up at my wrist. So then I match up the short raw edges here and pin that on. So you can kind of see here how this is folded in half. Again, wrong sides together, and then the right side touching the right side of your sleeve. Then we're just going to stretch it a little bit to make it fit and continue folding our binding piece in half, matching up all the raw edges and pinning that in place all the way down to the wrist. So if you were doing the traditional binding method, you would sew this on open instead of folded. But like I said, this is just how I am doing it and how I'm showing you an easier way. Once you have everything pinned down here together, we're going to take our front piece now, and with wrong sides together, we're going to lay it on top of this piece here, lining up our shoulder and middle sleeve seam with this raw edge and just kind of adding it in to those pins, keeping all of those raw edges lined up as you insert your top piece into here. So this is now going to be 4 layers thick in this pin or clip here along your top arm seam. And then once you have everything secure and lined up, you're going to take this over to your machine and sew all the way along here, making sure that your edges all stay lined up, all 4 of them, and that you are catching all 4 edges in your seams. So once that's sewn, you can see here how it looks, and then when you open it up, it'll look like this, and you'll have kind of a little flap here all the way down your arm. So what we're going to do next is we are just going to take our other binding piece and do the exact same thing on this side. So again, folding this in half, matching it up on the back from the shoulder to the wrist, pinning that down, and then flipping this over and pinning this to it and sewing that on so it looks just like this sleeve. All right, I went ahead and sewed those strips down both shoulders, so when I flip it open, it's not going to be super flat, but I have this little flap here on both sides. Now what I'm going to do is find my front side, which this is my front, this is my back, and I'm going to fold this flap down, making sure I don't catch anything else, just fold it and pin it into place on my front sleeve here. So just kind of pin it down, pushing this out of the way. And so when you pin this down, your seam allowance is towards the back. So that pushes the bulk this way, and then the bulk from your binding is coming forward. And so this is, like I said, this is different than the binding used in the tutorial, but really the only difference it comes out is that this just ends up being slightly off-centered as opposed to being directly on top of the seam, but it's about the difference of 1/4 of an inch, and you can't really tell a difference at all. And like I said, it just is much easier, quicker, and I think cleaner, and gives a better overall look once you're done. So all these steps we're doing on this sleeve, we will do on this sleeve as well, but I'm just going to show you on one. So once you have this pinned down, what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your sewing machine or a cover stitch, and you can use a straight stitch on your sewing machine or a twin needle, and then or you could just do your cover stitch. I am just doing a straight stitch on my sewing machine. I will put it at about a 3.5 length, and then you're just going to top stitch right along the edge on top of your binding piece, all the way from the wrist up to the shoulder. Sorry. So you're going to be stitching all the way along this edge So you're going to be stitching all the way along this edge right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be back. All right, so I went ahead and just did both arms at the same time. And you can see here, I have my one stitch in there. Now, if you did a straight stitch and just did one stitch without a twin needle, like I did, if you would like, you could go over it again and give it kind of that cover stitch look, but I don't think anybody really notices it, and it's not worth it, and I only had just enough thread to top stitch this. So I'm just going to be doing the one stitch and leave it at that. So once you have done both arms, what you're going to do is you're going to fold it back in half, and we're going to just work on one side at a time. You're going to match up your armpit seam here and pin that in place, and then just continue matching all the way down your sleeve to your wrist. I'm going to match up here, and then all the way down your waistline to the edge, and then you're just going to go up and sew all the way around from the waistline to the wrist, and then you're going to do the same thing on this side here. Once you sewed up both of those seams, you should have now what basically resembles a sweatshirt. We just don't have the finishes on the edge. So we're just going to set this aside now, and we're going to, I'm going to do all of my cuffs and waistband and neckband at the same time. So it's basically the same thing that we're doing. So for the cuffs, you should have 2 cuffs, and you, since these are square, you definitely want to look at your fabric and find the grain line. I don't know if you can really see on there, but you're going to see some real subtle stripes in your fabric. It's also the way that's going to be the most stretchy, and that is your grain line. So you want to fold it along your grain line. So my grain line is going this way, and we're going to fold it in half like so. So like I said, my grain line is going up and down here, and we're going to pin these raw edges on our long side here. You're going to do that on both cuffs. So again, make sure you find your grain line and fold along that. And then, so those are our cuffs. Our neckband, the same thing for all of these. Your grain line should be going up and down, but it's just easier to kind of know on your rectangle pieces. So for this one, we're going to fold it in half, matching up our short edge here, our raw edges, clip that in place, and then for our waistband, we're going to do the same thing, fold it in half, match up this short edge here, and pin that in place. So then we're going to just take all of these and sew along these edges that we have pinned or clipped. So once you have your bands and cuffs sewn, so you can see here, and again, it's right sides are together, so after you sew it, you should only see the wrong sides of all of your pieces. We are going to start with the waistband. You can really do these in any order you want, but I'm just going to start with the waistband, and we're going to bring our body of our sweatshirt back over, and we are going to take our waistband and fold it. I like to just start at my seam here and fold it wrong sides together, matching up the raw edge and clipping that into place, lining up my seam on both sides, and then kind of doing the same thing and finding that halfway point on the other side and matching up those seams there, making sure my placement is even and that my raw edges are even. I'm going to clip that in place. Then I'm going to fold it this way so that my clips are on top of each other, and then make sure my raw edges are lined up, and I'm going to put some sort of marking. I like to just use my clips on both edges here. So this is called quartering my waistband because I am dividing it into 4 equal parts. And so now this is how we are going to make sure we are evenly putting our waistband on our sweatshirt. So what I like to do is I open up my sweatshirt and I take my side seam of my waistband and I line it up with, it doesn't matter which, one side seam of my sweatshirt. So you're going to turn it this way so that your raw edge is facing down and the raw edge of your sweatshirt is also facing down. You're going to kind of open up your sweatshirt and just slide this in there. And I'm going to pin this in place, lining up the seams of my waistband and the seam of my sweatshirt, then also making sure my raw edges are even on all 3 layers here. And then I'm going to take this pin, this marking over here on this side, my halfway point from my seam, and line it up to my other seam, again making sure my raw edges are all even. And then what I'm going to do is I just fold my sweatshirt this way so that my side seams are on top of each other and these pins are even. And I find this fold mark and then I just take my pin here, match it up to that fold there, and add my sweatshirt into place, and then do the same thing over here. Find the fold, match it up with my pin, and clip it into place, and then just kind of go around and line up those raw edges along the side. And you can see the band is a little bit smaller than the sweatshirt, so you're gonna have to stretch it a little bit, which is why you want to quarter it and make it even. So you want to make sure that it is stretched evenly. So I'm just going to take this over to my machine and slightly stretch the waistband as I sew to make it fit. You don't want to overstretch it that you're stretching the main fabric as well. You only want the waistband to fit, and then make sure that your raw edges are lined up. You can add more pins, kind of stretch it and fit it in there if you need to, or if that makes you more comfortable. I do just fine like this with 4 clips, but you can always add more clips. There's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this on and be back. Once your waistband is sewn on, it's going to look like this, and you can see it kind of flaps open and our waistband is done. So now for our cuffs and our neckband, we're basically going to be doing the same method for these. I'm going to do my neckband next. My neckband, again, you fold it in half at the seam, and then find that center point, fold that in half again, and mark it, and then, so this is halved, now we're going to quarter it, so we're going to match up our halves, and pin those. For the neckband, I like to match my seam of my neckband up with the center back as opposed to the side seam, because then it is more hidden. So once I get this pinned, so what I'm going to do is just evenly pull this and find my center seam of here, match it with this fold, and then I'm going to use that to find my front. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make with the neckbands is they automatically use the shoulder seams as their quarter points, which is not the case, because as you can see, typically the front neckline is lower, meaning it is longer. So if you use the shoulder seams, that is not a true quarter point, and you're going to have more stretch along the neckband on the front, which may cause it to bunch. So make sure you match these, your front and back, center, and line that up. So you can see here, this is my quarter point here, and here's my shoulder seam. So it leans a little bit towards the front. Pin that in place, and then do the same thing over here on this side. And then I also like to add a tag into the back of my makes, especially for my kids, so that they can figure it out. So I just take my center back and I have tags made and clip it in there. You could use a ribbon or just another piece of fabric. and just clip it in there just to give a way to mark the back. But so now once that's on there, we're just going to do the same thing we did with our waistband, stretch it slightly to fit, and sew all the way around. So I got my neckband sewn on. Now we're just going to do our cuffs. We'll do one at a time. I'm just going to show you one, and then the process will be exactly the same for the other side. It doesn't matter which cuff goes to which sleeve. So I'm just going to start over here. I'm going to take my cuffs and again fold them in half, matching up the seam. Now the only thing different for the cuffs is because they are so small, I only quarter them or half them instead of quarter them, because quartering them, your clips are going to almost be on top of each other, and I just don't really find it necessary for the size that they are. You can do it if you would like I said, the more clips, there's nothing wrong with that. So what I'm going to do again is take my seam of my cuff. I like to match it to the underside. So since this one has two seams, the underside, so the side without the binding on it, and I slide it in there. And I did not mention this with the other two, with the neckband and the waistband, but if you are using a directional fabric, so meaning your print like is all going in one direction, make sure when you add your cuffs and neckbands and waistband that you are putting them in the correct way, so that when you flip it down, they line up, because otherwise you might end up with it upside down, and you don't want that. This isn't directional, so it does not matter at all. You can see it's just kind of a random print, but that's just one thing to note as you attach these. So I have my seams lined up there, and this one is pretty easy because you do have this seam here and it was just half down the sleeve. So I'm just going to take my halfway point here and line it up with my top seam. And you can see again, it is much smaller. So then we're just going to stretch it and sew all the way around. And then like I said, you will do your other cuff with the other wrist exactly the same. And then you are done. All right, so once you get your cuffs added on, everything is done. You can turn it right side out and you are done. And you can just see how cute this is with this detail down the side. And it's just kind of a fun way to kind of spice up a pattern, especially if you use solids. You can kind of mix and match. And then paired with the bottoms, it is super cute. And like I said, I did link the tutorial for the bottoms in the description below, so you can check that out. And the fabric for this, I will say, is French Terry from Raspberry Creek Fabrics, which I will also link down below. I love that for sweatsuits, tops and bottoms for my kids and even for myself. So you can check that out if you want. Then if you had any other questions, feel free to leave a comment, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram is @sewbex, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have about this pattern or other patterns, or maybe sewing techniques. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future videos.